You don't want to know what's going after, because obviously the main piece here is about the end of the world.
Yeah, but it also tries to keep you continuously in the present moment of the piece.
Why?
I have the feeling it's like you are very involved with the here and now of the rotonda and the piece. But it's true that somehow I was interested in this idea of how time no longer with the floating turntable and all the revolutions that it does. Somehow it mirrors in terms of shape and motif the rotonda, the cupola, the circle. So you have this circle, which is the one of the vinyl, doing all these lapses, all these revolutions, and I was interested in how this sort of this disturbs, but I hope in a good way, the relation with the space, and takes the space a little bit off this very serene track that it has, which is like the circle, this architecture of the time, which is very serene. It shows everything around, whether it's the world or the cosmos or everything we can imagine as one harmonic whole, and one can be in the center of it, which is also very much related to the way how one wanted to, by one I mean a nation, a powerful individual, a certain way of life, the Western way of life, wanted to feel like is a center of the world and has a mission to explore the rest of the world as if it was the perimeter, like the suburbs of the circle.
Yes, but it's more complex than that, I think, because there are two elements of perturbation. One is that your hero is a record player, and the other one is the music, which is a music of the end of the world. I stay kind of long time there, and I began being anxious.
Well, I mean, in French, is an expression that I like, that moi, je voulais que ça donne le trac à l'espace.
Oui.
Et à travers l'espace aux gens.
Anxiety,
well,
kind
donner
of.
Le trac, c'est quoi en français?
Trac
c'est autre chose que
it's kind of an emotion.
Emotion of syncopation, of a certain...
Well, yeah, when you are afraid of
something off track of the expected somehow.
Yes.
Like I think avoir le trac because I think it's a very beautiful expression, and an equal or similar but not equal necessary expression. It would be like when the heart misses a beat, no? Like this moment of something goes off, something is out of joint, and so on. So the music, yeah, you use the term the hero, the main character. There are two heroes, maybe, or I don't know if I call them heroes in the film, but they are not necessarily present in the image per se. But I would say the main character is the stylus, no, le saphir, the stylus, oui. which at the same time is at the mercy of being in zero gravity, in weightlessness. But at the same time, as soon as it gets a chance, it dives to play the next moment in music. However, it cannot play the music in its chronology, in its continuity. So it changes also the chronology of the music. It plays with a bit with the idea that this piece of music, fantastic piece of music of Messiaen, which is called Quartet for the End of Times, it also plays with the idea of time within the end of times, because what in the music, as it was written by Messiaen, is happening only later, because of the way of the stylus going wherever it's sent to go because of being in zero gravity. Sometimes you'll play a music which belonged to a moment before in the composition.
But why did you choose this hero?
This piece of music, or
no,
the
this object.
Well, I was the element that I wouldn't call it inspiration, because the inspiration you find it along the way. But I said the triggerer was the story of Ron McNair. Ron McNair was a astronaut, Afro-American astronaut, who was, besides being an excellent astronaut, he was a very good saxophone player. And he was to be, and was also his dream, but he was to be the first person to record a musical instrument in space in condition of weightlessness. And that was supposed to happen, and it did not happen because of the unfortunate disaster of the Challenger. He was one of the crew members of the Challenger.
Horrible.
Yes, it's this.
So he died.
Like everybody else on board. Nothing survived from this, nor human being, nor object, with the exception of one very particular object, which was a football ball, which for some reason is like a little world that survived to the whole
chaos,
thing, and eventually fall in the back garden of a family in somewhere in Texas. I forgot now the precise place. And years later, it was in homage to that crew. It was re-brought to space with another shuttle on another mission, and it was brought to the International Space Station. In the film, so Ron McNair, the fact that the intention did not took place, this is what interests me a lot. I know what he was supposed to play, meaning one knows what he was supposed to play. It was a piece written for clarinet for him by Jean-Michel Jarre, and which would be part of a song, and it would have been the first time performed down in Houston in a concert that became known, Rendezvous in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
But I was not interested to make happen what ultimately did not happen, meaning I didn't want to defy what couldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Hence I was interested to find out what is the music of an intention. We often know what's the music of the actions, but what is the music of what's the soundtrack of an intention? And then after a lot of research and of course encountering other pieces of music which were not equally, but in other ways interesting, I was completely taken by the Abyss of the Birds, L'Abîme des Oiseaux, which is the third movement of the Quartet for the End of Times, for multiple reasons, musical reasons, the title, what it inspired it, the idea of the abyss, for example, but also because possibly it's the most famous composition written in a condition of captivity. When Messiaen composed it, he was prisoner of war in a German stalag, being a French soldier, and he wrote this piece of music in so say in extraordinary conditions, where he did not actually write it for instruments. He wrote it for the people, because he wrote it for people who could play it with him there. So he wrote it for 3 co-prisoners and himself, therefore it's a quartet, who were there, who could perform it. So he composed it there. It was the very first time performed in the Stalag. And it's a lot to read.
So it's intrication of stories that you are not telling, but you make reference to them.
That is not the first time. Yeah, I think I wouldn't even say that they inspire me, and I need to digest them. So somehow, indirectly, implicitly, they are part of the work, but not explicitly. My work is not there to tell the stories. I'm not interested to tell stories, but somehow the way how they linger via my research and inspiration of these stories, they implicitly become part of the work, but one does not necessarily need to know about all of them. But so why these two? It's because at the same time it's an encounter between a clarinet, which was the original piece written for by Messiaen, and the saxophone, who would have been the first instrument to be recorded in weightlessness in space, but also between two destinies and 2 moments of profound loneliness, being in captivity, even if it's 2 different forms of captivity, because one is captive of a geopolitical situation, being a POW in a war, and the other one is being captive of this seemingly high-tech environment, but which is also extremely precarious, as unfortunately we know it many times.
Yeah, but in this case, you decide to represent this loneliness through a music machine.
What a better...
Right. But the machine is not a human, after all.
Yeah, I think what comes across, obviously, I can't argue it, but but it was part in my thing, and I believe it comes across. It's like there is a scene in the interior of the International Space Station, clearly there is no trace or presence of a human being, so it looks like something may have happened in the meantime. So it looks like maybe it's an image coming from the future into our present. But the only last thing that witnesses a form of human and shows of human sensibility is this stylus that tries to play as good as it can and when it can, due to the laws of zero gravity, that piece of music. So somehow there is something in its acrobatical, elliptical movements. I have the feeling that there is something almost human and intelligent in its acrobacy. Also, this is also part of the making of the film. For example, while I had no control when the stylus is going to land, so to say, and of course there is a part of it that I pre-wrote before in collaboration with Olivier Guanard and André Vida, the disorder of the order, meaning knowing that the stylus would never play, it cannot be that it would take off in a specific place in the vinyl and fall back in the same place, because then it would be complete animation. It would be like.
So where did you do that, this experience?
So this is the mathematical model of knowing, which is very precise and knows exactly what's the behavior in zero gravity of a body once you know its mass, the center of the mass, and what is the first spin. Meaning, what is the first spin that rotates.
But where did you do this simulation?
Why or where?
Where?
Well, first of all, I did this simulation in my studio in a very simple way, or relatively simple, not as it looks now in the film, with my assistant. And then I, together with André and Olivier, we thought musically about how what would be a new order, a new chronology of the Messiaen that does not follow the linearity of the piece of music, because I knew it could not follow it. That's as simple as it would be. So we split the original piece of music in as many breaths as are needed to play the clarinet piece, and actually Messiaen had annotated where the breaths are throughout the thing. So we split in as many. I can't remember now. Maybe 35.
No,
breaths.
but what about the absence of gravity?
No,
gravity.
Once we did this, and once I knew what I would like the stylus to play the next time it lands, then I worked with people who are specialized in CGI, computer generated imagery, which does not mean only making the looks of what you see, only the modeling, but also means that they are able to bring in all the mathematical models of how a body behaves itself in zero gravity. And these models, they also had some feedback from the French space program. I even had in the beginning some contact at the NASA, but at the end of the day, all these models are public domain, meaning one has access to this.
Redo.
To apply.
Wow. Okay.
They are known.
What is there are two things really striking about this piece. One is the contrast. Let's speak about the first one, which is on one side, you use overwhelming means to show because it's super large and super loud. And on the other side, you are whispering something. So there's something super loud and there's something whispered.
Yeah, I mean, one could say that I'm happy to do this overwhelming. I think it's the subject that makes it overwhelming. When it comes to the scale, everything is relative, meaning I think it's in the right scale given how big the space is. It can't, so it sits within the space. And of course I thought a lot about it, about how big or how big it should not be and how small it should not be to get to that scale. So once we enter in the relative, I think it's in the size it is in order to deal the space, but also to respond, to enter in a dialogue with the cupola. If it had been way smaller, it wouldn't enter anymore into that relation.
What about the whispering?
And there is no other way, to show a moving image in the rotonda, technically speaking, because if you project that you would see nothing in the middle of the day. So in a way, it's not a. Once the decision of showing that piece there, for all the reasons I was discussing before, the relation, trying to give the track to the space, this relation of the vinyl, which at the same time rotates like this because of the principle of how it plays, but also at the same time rotates like this, and the idea that we're in the rotonda of the Bourse, which wants to represent the world according to the vision of the 19th century. So of this was important. So once the decision was taken that I wanted to show that piece there, then after the rest it was a matter of what can make it visible there, and there is only LED wall nowadays that can show at daytime something which still carries it, the image, and then the rest was a matter of scale. But scale is the same thing. It's like in music when you compose. There is nothing is big or small because things are in a relation.
Yeah, but what about the whisper?
So here we come to the whisper. What you call the whisper, I think, is this. Is
the meaning. You don't speak directly
I
about.
never speak directly.
Yeah.
I'm never explicit. I think.
So what is that? Is that
I think there is so much. I think probably it's also because there is so much fake, learned directness in the world today. Whether I don't know if it's something inherited from politics or communication or something, but I think as an artist, or at least in my case, I'm interested in I'm not interested in telling. I'm interested in conveying. I'm not interested in speaking loud or communicating. Like you say, to use your word, I'm interested in whispering.
But what are you whispering?
There is not a message that I whisper. It's all the things we already discussed about. It's like, what does it mean when two destinies meet? What does it mean when somebody was captive in a stalag as a prisoner of the Second World War becomes the composer of the music that later becomes a soundtrack of a beautiful intention that could not happen due to the explosion of the Challenger, and so it relates to the destiny of another person, which is Ron McNair, and I think again it's like a polyphonic whisper. It's not one whisper that is sort of monolithic and it's about something and wants to say something.
But what is your dream of a visitor coming there and thinking something?
What the visitor thinks, I don't have a dream to know it. What I hope is that somehow it produces a sort of a sensible short moment of loss of balance, but balance not only physical, maybe mental, and this could trigger something in the order of how we start thinking about things, or this little shift can provoke a bigger shift, and you can feel something through different perspectives. So in that sense, it's a little bit this little movement. Sometimes when you have a physical problem, you go to osteopath and they almost don't move anything, but all of a sudden the muscle knows that, wow, I can go further, rather than something that is there just to please your body, but which would have been a little bit like making a program that pleases people without necessarily producing this inner perte d'équilibre, like the inner shift. So I hope for that there is a sort of momentary, subtle sense of loss of balance, which might start somewhere here in the stomach, but eventually could find a way up to the thinking.
Anyway, it works, I can tell you.
Thank you.
And there's a mystery. You create a mystery, in fact. But why is there this obsession with music?
Well, by now I think I know. I think it's because, of course, every time I want to think of something new, I usually tend to be attracted to things I don't know how to resolve, meaning how to approach them. And this is what becomes interesting to me, not to know. But when I look back, of course, by now, looking back at the last 25 years, 20 something years, I can see how the relation to music evolved and where did it, what prompted it. Like the first films I did, of course, language was important. Like Intervista, the film I did with my mother, where language is not only it's told by language, but it's also told by the possibility of the language to tell. Because I came across, just for a short introduction, I came across in Tirana, in my parents' home, of this film that I've not seen before, where, having taken it with me in Paris, I could see in the school where I was at the Art Deco, and I could see it was my mother in a Congress of the Youth, and then she's giving an interview, but the sound was lost. So to recuperate, to find the sound, I went back to Albania, to Tirana, and I was able to find out what she said with the help of people from a school for the deaf and mute, so who were able to read her, the movement of her lips. And that's the moment when I became very much aware of that there is a certain, I call it opacity in language, about how the syntax takes control of the content, but in ways that are quite opaque. And this, you can see, it's difficult to explain it in countries like in France or England, where history, at least the modern history, has not gone through huge ruptures or through huge breaks but in countries like in Albania, but not only, where all of a sudden you have not just a fall of a regime, but a fall of the way how what the society lives for, what they believe they live for, like going from the certain values of, say, socialism or communism to the transition, and to readjusting to new values, and how language, when you have a bit of a difference, and then you realize, and I knew, with the help of the people who could read her lips, I was able to transcribe or to what my mother was saying in this interview, and you realize this langue de bois, this how clearly language played a role to serve a system, but which it does in all the systems.
Meaning that you don't want to use the language, you prefer to use the music?
So, meaning that from then I felt a little bit, I felt very lucky to go through this experience, but also I felt a little bit like hands off from language. And then the following films were more like silent, and then sound came in, and then these brought me to music. So there was a certain path between Intervista and the first pieces with music, which are from Intervista was 1998, and the first pieces with music are from 2003, 2004.
So
there was an interval of
it
5.
probably means that you don't trust the world.
This is one of the things. But once I started working with music, and by music I don't mean melody. I'm of course interested about masterpieces, and I often work with pieces which are masterpieces of their own time, but also have been at the avant-garde of their own time. But I'm also interested in the aspect how music can organize time, and by organizing time in an exhibition, it produces a very peculiar link between time and space, when you take into account that we are in an exhibition, we are not in a movie theater, so there are trajectories of people, there is the choreography of people, how they move around in the space, and how music helps me construct sort of pockets of time within the space. So it's very close to architecture. It's very close to malleability, and very close to this notion that I particularly am interested in, this idea of the present moment. I know now, just having read that, for example, the longest moments in our experience, having been studied by developments in neuroscience, happen during moments of listening to music. They could reach up to 8 seconds, is believed, which does not happen with language, because, for example, as I speak, just because of the way of how language is organized, you may not completely know what I'm going to say next, but already your brain can break the sentence in what you just heard, what you are listening, and what you're about to listen. And this is barely more than the duration of a word. Like within the word, you already place the word before, whether it's an adjective, it's already back in time. While in music, there are certain musical phrases that are able to keep our cognition, our brain, our faculties feel like they are within the cradle of the present moment.
And so what are you trying to whisper now? Are you working? Have you a new project?
No, I'm still working. I mean, I've been working before on a project, which for a moment I put it a little bit on pause because of the time and the engagement with this exhibition. But also I'm working on with the Bourse and with Cyrus, who is in charge of the programming of the performances here on two performances, one coming in November and one coming in the early January. But if we want to think, if you'd like to know, like what something else not related to this show or not related to this, what I'm working on, like it was, I want to do a performance which again produces a strong encounter between physical effort, cognition, and gesture and production of sounds or production of music. And it would be a performance of, it would be about organizing a marathon, a mini, meaning in terms of how many people would be involved. It wouldn't be more than a dozen, which goes through the full length of a marathon, but the moment that it encounters the music of the performance, it's at the finish line, which can be somewhere on a stage, somewhere interior, where there is a piano, one of these pianos that play by themselves.
Yes.
Like the one you see in my film, or at Philippe's piece in the collection.
Philippe Arnaud.
So like, yeah, they are called, the Steinway ones are called Spirio, the Yamaha ones are called Disclavier. And what I'm working on is that at the very moment of when they reach the finish line, which somehow corresponds also with the keyboard of the piano, the piano is triggered by the breaths of the runners when they arrive and they catch their breath. So,
but this will happen? You are working on that now?
Yes, I was working on that actually until this spring, and I hope for it to happen. I put it a bit on pause because it demands time and preparation, working with people, which was a time I didn't have in the last 6 months because I was preparing for the show here. But it's a little bit like rethinking what could be when one thinks of this beautiful idea of what's a prepared instrument, or the idea of the prepared piano, or all the pieces for prepared piano slightly before cage, or even after, which usually is with having this mechanical bits and pieces put between the strings, and to make to expand the potential of the piano as a musical instrumental that produces sounds, and also somehow to make the piano somehow differ from its highway of Western sounds in a way, because it's by excellence it's a Western instrument, and this is what the prepared piano does back then. But I was thinking, like, what is the prepared piano today? How to make it produce a derive? How to make it shift, but not through mechanical means by placing things, but it's the breath of the people that would trigger and play the piano.
And my last question is about Albania. I'm going to discover for the first time Albania, to travel there. So what is the influence? You were raised there. What's the influence of this country on you and on your work? I mean.
Well, I first of all, the very first works, like the example of Intervista I described with my mother, but also another film, a few films or works I've done that I've shot there, like.
But in your spirit more. No,
but I'll say, meaning it is there, arguably present in the work. In my spirit, I think it's it was difficult. It's been difficult for the society on the whole. This living through two systems. This moment of rupture, but this rupture produces also a certain. It prepares you and produces a sensibility towards intervals, towards in-betweens, about interstices. And I think this is something, having lived in the time and remembering it, because I was only 14. I mean, I was 14 when the system falls, so I was
the witness.
I do remember it, how it was, but also being through the time of transition and then arriving in Paris, living here, and eventually Berlin. It's like being able to cross not only between countries, but also cross between ways. I wouldn't call it ways of life, but societies, very, very specifically different societies. And being able to have lived through this, I think it gives me some form of magma that I'm made of.
What a good conclusion. Merci, monsieur.
Merci à toi.